really a clouser. I mean, by definition, it's a clouser. It was created by Jim Bernstein up in Eldridge Brothers up here in Maine. I use this more than anything, or second most to like crabs, I guess. I use it a ton in Maine, but we used it down in the Cape like all the time. And Chatham was awesome. A lot of the old guys up in Maine swear by it. So it's a cool pattern. It's just a really kind of more intricate clouser. It's a lot of different bucktail. The way he used to tie it, he used to use like hackle feathers on the tail. I kind of skip doing that and just do bucktail, which is the other version he does, along with calf tail. You can even get away from the calf tail. I'll kind of explain that as I go. So anyway, it's like a simple setup. It's going to be a basic, like setting up your eyes like you would on any clouser. So start just a, little bit back of the eye. I mean, I would call it like a third of an inch, something like that, but whatever you really want. And I'm doing your typical saltwater hook. I use the regular Mustad 34007. You can use anything. I'm cheaping out here. So, but do the figure 8 wraps to get those eyes on. Don't get the eyes too far forward because there's quite a bit of material you put on, and you don't want to crowd it. It becomes kind of a pain in the butt. So, and once you do that, finish your thread behind the eyes, unlike a clouser where you put it in the front to tie in the first thing of bucktail. We're going to do this different because, like I said, it's not quite a clouser. But once you guys got those eyes in, I'm not going to do it this particular time, but normally I would take some Solaras or some kind of UV glue and just kind of secure the eyes in there. It just gives it a lot more durability, but like I said, we're just going to kind of skip past that anyway. Do it if you would like. Hey, Les. Anyway, so the next thing is to grab a bucktail. The colors that Jim Bernstein uses is a white, the seafoam green, and a bronze. They're not the easiest colors to find. I assume Bernstein has them. Obviously, white they'll have. But the seafoam green and bronze are kind of a weird color. I can't find them anywhere but like Eldridge Brothers and I think Bernstein. So those are the colors he uses. But for this anyway, we're gonna start off with white. I use any color. It doesn't really matter as long as it's white, olive, brown, something like that's fine. Black and purple's cool. I've done like a night version of this. It's pretty neat. But grab a small clump. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. This is going to be one of those flies that like less is more, because if you start adding too much, I can assure you it's going to be a real pain at the end to tie it in. The first couple I made a couple of years back were just monstrosities. So, but just a small clump. Doesn't even have to be anything pretty because we're going to tie it into the tail or for the tail. Snip off the ends like you would tying a clouser. I mean, it's really basic. I don't know if I can get any closer, but just snip off the ends and tie it in right behind the eyes. And you're going to just advance the thread to just the beginning of the bend of the hook here. And keep that material right on top of the hook. If it starts going off to the side, kind of back up and fix it. You want it, like I just did, you want it right on the top if you can. One thing I meant to mention with the eyes, don't go too small with them. I noticed that because the fly, there's so much material, it's sort of bulky, that if you put small eyes on it, it doesn't actually flip it over all the time easily. So make sure you kind of use appropriate sized eyes. Just something I've noticed when I've been fishing them, and I can actually see the fly quite well. The next thing I throw on there is the Bill's body braid, which most of you guys know me, of course, I love. I'm using the pearl. You could use a green or there's a couple other color variations that would go fine with it, but pearl is good for everything as far as I'm concerned. You just tie it into the back, and you can advance your thread forward, and go have it go right up to behind the eye of the hook. Once you get that sorted out, you can just kind of close wraps on it. You're going to wrap the body braid forward. You're just making a body on it or a belly on it. You don't have to taper it or anything. Just wrap it forward. And then when you get to the eyes, you can go like figure 8 right over and around the eyes. And then right up to the nose, so to speak. And tie that right in. Drew, tell me if I'm going too fast or anything, or any of you for that matter. Okay, so once we've got that in, the next step we're going to do is we're going to flip it over. As long as you guys have a vise that'll do that. And I did mention the material is some kind of a Flashaboo. Flashaboo, any kind of flash, it's all fine. I have like I think they call it a peacock color. I can't remember. It's like a kind of a greenish, darker mix. And I have a regular pearl. Any of them really work. I'm just gonna do the pearl one for now. Just take a couple strands. Again, I've said this a million times before, like in our tying nights, but like less is more. I don't like to use a ton. So, 2-3 strands, whatever you feel like doing. There's kind of a lot of flash in this, so I try not to go too overkill with it. So just take it. I like to just make the V with it, with the thread, and just tie it right in. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. This is going to be pretty covered up for the most part. And I just cut the ends to kind of match the length of the bucktail that's already on there. A little longer is fine. It really is not going to matter. And try to separate some of them here. So that's just going to kind of lay down on there. I'll give you guys a second to kind of catch up with that. After that, the next thing I start doing is grabbing those bucktails. Again, I have white, regular white one, a foam green or seafoam green, and a bronze one. I'm going to start with the white. Really small amount. We're going to stack all 3 colors on top here. So if you start getting with big amounts of it, it's going to bulk up and you'll start pulling out hair. It's really kind of much. So really, like whatever you think is a little bit, like half of that, I can assure you. Like this is way too much, so I'm just going to kind of thin it out. Grab the tips and just kind of pull out the thin ones anyway, and that'll usually work. But we're talking pretty small amount here when you really clump it down. So we'll take some of these stray ones I just messed up. And you're gonna want to tie them in so they do match the length of the tail on there if you can, or the best you can. So just kind of measure it on there from behind the eye all the way down to the tail there, and snip them off. And when you tie them in on the nose here, just do like 1 or 2 wraps. Probably 2 wraps is probably safe. You don't need to go crazy with it because, again, we're going to keep wrapping more and more on it. If you start wrapping and wrapping and wrapping, the nose is going to be so big, again, you can't tie it because we go back and forth on that nose quite a bit. After you've done that, next color is just the seafoam green in this case. Same concept, just a small amount, nothing crazy. It's going to look all kind of silly till we get it off the vise because all the hair is going to be shot up like that. So. But measure it again against the tail. Have some kind of uniformity if you want with it. I think I pronounced that right. And tie it right in. Do a couple wraps here to get some of those hairs out of the way. And I know Drew was asking before, but like I've tied them a little small. I mean, normally I do like anywhere from a 2 to a 1/0, something like that. It's not very, it's not small per se, but I've tied like 4s and 6s, and for whatever reason, these 2, like I drag them in the mud and stuff, and they work fine. It's weird, they work well. The jigging action, like a clouser, is always nice. It's just, I think once we've made like 500 clousers in the winter, it's nice to do something a little bit different, something like that. Anyway, the next color is going to be that bronze, or whatever color you have. Something with darker. It's essentially going white, lighter to darker is what Jim Bernstein was going for. Just a small clump of it, of course, again. Something like that size. It's really small. Measure it up again, and then we'll tie it right in on top. And once we do that, I know I might be jumping ahead. Just, I don't know. Tell me to stop if I'm way ahead of you guys here. I'll give it a minute anyway. We are going to, I won't do it just yet, but I'm going to add some more flash to it. And this is just regular flash. This is like a light green or olive, as they call it. But I think Jim Bernstein uses also the peacock flash color, which is like a black, right? I have that somewhere. I just didn't dig it out. You really can't go wrong. I assume you could do this all in white with just some red on the belly, and it would be pretty cool. I mean, it really would be kind of neat to do. Anyway, all right, so I'm going to throw some flash in. So just a handful of strands of it. Doesn't have to be a lot, like I said. But I've got like maybe 4 in here. And like I said, it's just that green flash stuff. So do the same. I mean, you do the same way I do it. I just fold it around the thread and tie it right in on top of that bronze in this case. Of course, I messed up tying that in, and I have strands that are too long. But so essentially, it's going to be white on the tail. You've got white, seafoam green, bronze, some flash on the top. And once we're all done that, we're going to flip it back over. Because we're going to have a couple more things to do here in the top. So probably the hardest part of all this, which isn't even necessarily difficult, is tying in the calf tail. That's what Jim Bernstein originally did, and it's supposed to be for the belly. So once it flips over, you're going to see that the calf tail is kind of, when you get it wet, it's kind of translucent. It's pretty neat. Oops, I didn't even see the things up here. Hold on. No, on eye color, Jim Bernstein, who created this, he originally did, I believe they're white eyes. He does them in, I think he sells them in the store in red. I do them in white, red, yellow. I mean, it really, I've yet to have any issue with any of them. But I think his original one was white anyway, so for what that's worth. Anyway, so the calf tail, that's the hardest one to tie in. What you normally look for is the longer ones, and towards the top of the tail, you'll find the calf tail itself bends over. That's kind of what you want, because you want that kind of concave deal, like you would with a feather almost. You want to come up and over, because it's going to form a belly on here once it's flipped over and stuff. You can get away with just using bucktail if you don't have calf tail. You're just going to do a short amount of it. And the way you're going to tie it in is like you would tie the top layer of a clouser. You're tying in front, over the eyes, and on the back. We're going to do that with calf tail in this case. Don't get a big amount of it. It's not the easiest stuff to work with. It does slide around. So, and this is actually like one of the best calf tails I've actually seen. So you don't want like crazy long fibers, but you don't want really short ones either, because it's even harder to work with. But get some sort of a clump, something like this size. It's hard to kind of, I don't know if you can actually see that, the lighting's crap, but it's going to be something of that size. Have it kind of come back to the bend of the hook, something of that nature, like that. And trim off the ends like you would with anything. The sharper the scissors on this, the better, because calf tail doesn't cut as easily as bucktail, if you guys haven't noticed that before. So you're going to tie it in right behind the eye. Do the regular pinch wrap like you would for most fly tying things. See, like I said, I already pulled off some fibers there. So, and give that some pretty good secure wraps. I'm using that Vivus thread, the 140, and that's some of the strongest stuff I've ever used. It's awesome. You can really crank down on that. That's kind of imperative, because if you don't, you're gonna pull out half the fibers. If you hit a rock or something quick, you're gonna lose them, and you have no belly. Will it fish? Yeah, but it's kind of looks silly. Once you get that tied in, it's going to look like a kind of a crazy mohawk thing. Just fold it over like you would, again, with a clouser. And you're going to tie in all that other material you've tied in behind the eye, oops, and over that calf tail. So you're kind of securing everything behind the eyes now, if that makes sense. As you do that, give it a couple good wraps. You want to push down on that calf tail. You want it to kind of come around the top of the hook so it comes down on it, if that makes sense. And that's going to form the belly a little bit more. And once you do that, just advance your thread back forward again. We're going to tie in some zonker strip here in a second. One of the things with this fly, it looks kind of goofy when it's dry. When you're done and put some head cement and stuff, go get it wet. Put it under some hot water. That gives it a nice form, and it keeps the form for the most part. It just takes that hot water to kind of get the calf tail and the bucktail shape. That's normally what I do after the fact. It does look different. It looks quite a bit different. If you guys have gotten to that point, great. Like I said, that calf tail is kind of a pain in the butt to work with, but it is what it is. You can use a bucktail, like I said, on it. I throw it with an intermediate line. I know Anthony knows most of my fly line selections, the airflow, cold water, salt water thing. An intermediate line. I primarily will do that. I've been using more floating lines, some of the Rio ones, and that coastal quick shooter I've been launching it with. This is kind of a bulky fly, like obviously you're tying it, but it is a kind of a bigger fly. It's not air resistant, but it's kind of goofy to throw. So that little aggressive head, like you're going to get on either an outbound short or a coastal quick shoot or something like that, does help. It helps the hinging and all that too. I throw an 8-weight 99% of the time. Yeah. So, at first I didn't actually like that coastal quick shooter, and I gave it another try, and I really like it now. I've been using it for the last 2 years, something like that, 2.5 years. But yeah, I throw these with the 8-weight, sometimes a 9-weight, but it's primarily 8. I'm obsessed with 8-weight. So, all right. So if we got that, like I said, it looks like a mess right now. It'll all smooth out in a second. One of the keys to this fly that kind of sets it apart a little bit, makes it look cool, is the red zonker. It's just like, it's like a bleeding fish. It's supposed to be like a gill, but it does look like it's bleeding. What we're going to end up doing is you're not going to actually use any of the hide. We're going to cut the material from it. So I just take a pinch of it. Oops, I guess the camera's over here. Just take a pinch of it and cut it just at the base of the hide. If you can see that, just like that. Oops, yeah, there we go. So you just have a little bit of it. It's a total pain to work with when it's dry. So I just wet my fingers real quick and just get it so it's much more manageable. You're going to tie it in. It doesn't take much, but you don't want it to be all fluffy to start, because it's just not really manageable. I'm going to cut those ends one more time just to straighten them out. And what you're going to do is tie those butt ends right in front of the eye. I'm going to clear that up in a second when I can get my fingers out of the way. Tie it in just in the front of the eye there, and like you would do with the top layer of the clouser, or like you just did with the calf tail, you're going to just tie it in just once behind. You don't have to go crazy with it. And bring it back forward again. And you're gonna do the same thing again, just kind of on the other side of the other eye, just so it's kind of encompassing the whole thing. Use as much or as little of that zonker strip as you want. It's easier to work with a little bit less than more, because you'll find that fibers kind of go everywhere. And, I mean, will it fish? Yeah, but it's kind of ugly. So anyway, cut a little strip again, you can wet it. And then, like I said, I usually clean it up before I tie it in. So I'm gonna tie it right back in. Oops, and I missed that one anyway. All right. I'm assuming most of you guys can do the pinch wrap. If you can't, it's really useful in this fly and most fly tying. So you're gonna have it in there. It might not be real clean. Just kind of work with it. It'll work out once you get the other wrap in. Go right behind the eyes again and tie it in. I don't know if that shows up well, but it'll give you the idea for it. So you tied it in here. We'll clean all the nose up and everything after, but tie it in here, over the eyes, tie it right behind it. And you should be pretty good there. When you're done with that, we'll work our thread forward again. And we are coming up on the last part of this. No, I don't leave the hide attached. I think I did that at the beginning and then tried cutting it off, and it just didn't seem to work for me. For some reason, I can work with it, just like cutting a little piece of it off, just the fibers themselves, wetting them and tying them in. You could certainly actually cut the hide itself, tie it in, and just cut the hide off. But if you don't get a really close cut on that hide, you're gonna bulk up that nose more. That's just a kind of a guess, but I've noticed that before with like the cross-cut zonker strips, trying to kind of clean that up when you tie them around a shank or something. So now that you've got that, the zonker strip itself just has a lot of movement. I suspect you could use anything. Another one you could use, it would be like Arctic foxtail, something like that. The body for itself, rather, not the tail. The short stuff, you could use anything. It just happens to be that he likes the Jim Bernstein, who created it, uses a zonker strip. It does have a lot of movement. I've messed around with this fly a lot under the water. It's really cool. I mean, it does move like crazy. And it just kind of has that, like, the gills, the blood kind of coming out. It's more for the gills, but the opening and closing, the flushing of that. So that's kind of how what his thought was on it. It's super popular down in southern Maine. I'm up in the middle of the state on the coast, but down in southern Maine, like, there's a whole group of, I call them old guys. They are old guys, I guess. Sorry, I didn't less. These guys just swear by it. It's kind of like a cult following down there, like the crab flies are in certain parts of Maine. No different than a clouser. I mean, as far as the followings go. I don't know that I have fished with him. I might have not known it. I usually run into a lot of guys that I don't know. But there's a lot of guys, like the guys that I know I all met doing like spay fishing or two-hand stuff. Yeah, see, I don't know a lot of the guys or anyone in Portsmouth, really. It's really southern Maine and the mid-coast, Portland area, and then Cape Cod, because I lived down there for a bunch of years, which is why I know Anthony. It must be a tough year. I know the guides are getting kind of hosed here. All right, so this whole mess, like, we're gonna cover it all up so you won't see a whole lot in a second, because underneath it looks like a car accident. Jim Bernstein normally will put more flash on. This is that peacock Flashaboo stuff. He'll put a couple strands on here and then put some peacock herl on. You can do either of that. I'm just gonna throw some peacock herl. It's gonna be the spine of the pretend fish we're tying here. One of the things he'd actually told me, because I used to go into their shop quite a bit when I was down that way, he says always put like extra peacock herl on, because if you haven't noticed, most peacock herl is really brittle. And he's right. All it takes is a couple casts. Smack it off the water and you'll break it off. So he likes to put like 7, 8, 9, 10 pieces of it on. I just grab a handful and tie them in. I'll lose half of them trying to tie them in anyway. But grab a clump of them. Something like, I grab something like this, which is, I don't know, 9 pieces maybe, something like that. You can kind of even them up if you want that natural curl at the end or the bend at the end of the peacock curl. That's cool. I sometimes just cut them off because they're brittle anyway and they'll break. So I kind of cut them at an angle just to have them. So end up with something like that. You can do a lot of stuff with peacock curl. You can kind of twist it. That'll kind of keep them together. You can bend them with your thumbnail, like you would like a party streamer or something, if that's a thing. Yeah, I mean, you could pretty much do anything with them. And that's kind of the cool thing with this whole pattern. The possibilities are endless. I mean, you can do every color possibility. For instead of body braid, you could wrap something on it. You can do anything for the zonker strip. I mean, really anything. You can make them unweighted. They do fish fine. I would rather see them weighted just so they do have the jigging action. I think that's part of the deal with them. But yeah, you can kind of come up with anything. And I like the dark colors for night. I've used them a few times. They are cool to use. But I'll throw these sight fishing. I won't throw big ones sight fishing because I'll spook them. But I use them along with crabs and shrimp patterns for sight fishing for stripers, which is Anthony and some of the guys I know that's the only thing I really enjoy doing. Anyway, so you can get your peacock herl behind the eye, tie it right in, and you're going to tie this in well, and then you're going to clip off the ends, because this is essentially the rest of the end of the fly pattern here. So now you can start tying it in, cleaning it up, all that stuff. Sorry, my loon bobbin likes to squeak. My other one doesn't, but this one does for some reason. And check on, when you're tying it off, just kind of check that you've secured everything and everything's kind of covered up. Jim Bernstein, again, the guy who created this pattern up here in Maine, what he does at the end, and it's kind of a cool idea. I do it on some of them and sometimes I forget. I swear it doesn't actually matter, but it does look neat. He'll take a black Sharpie. So we'll finish it off if I didn't actually say that. He'll take a black Sharpie, and where this peacock herl ends on the head here, he'll finish off here with black Sharpie, just kind of like a line or two across. It does bleed into the thread, kind of why I don't bother doing it. But the bottom of the fly, it looks like the spine goes all the way from the tail to the tip of the head instead of stopping a little bit forward. It's an aesthetic thing. I mean, it's cool that he does it, but it's not necessarily incredibly necessary. So once that's all done, you got to take it out of the vise to kind of see what it looks like, because it does certainly need you need the material taken out and back to kind of place here. You got to definitely put head cement on it, otherwise you're going to lose a lot of stuff on it. I've been using that Solara's bone dry stuff. I swear by that for this. You can even do what I've been doing lately too, is also doing on top of the zonker, on top of the eyes here. I've been kind of putting some of that Solara's on it as well. It does kind of make a mess at times, but it'll keep that in good shape as well, because at least where I fish, I know you guys fish mostly either Cape Cod or Rhode Island, stuff like that. There's a lot of sand and things, but we've got a lot of rocks and trees and stuff like that. Thanks, man. It doesn't take much to smack the fly into pieces. So if I can put head cement on it, make it much more durable, I'm a happy camper. And once you're done, like you said, I throw it under the sink in hot water. And I can explain it sometimes, but yeah, that's kind of it. Oh, what was the head cement that I recommended, Ed? That's that Solara's bone dry. It is a UV glue or a UV finish. I know Anthony has them at the shop. The stuff is awesome. They got it in there about, I don't know, 3-4 years ago. That bone dry is exceptionally awesome stuff. Be mindful because it's UV. Don't keep the cap off forever with lights or outside, especially outside, and don't zap it with the cap off with a UV light. We've all done that. I know it's been mentioned and it's asked all the time online, but the Solara's UV head cement, the bone dry, gets kind of crystallized if it's cold. It also gets crystallized if it was like shipped cold or sits for too long. Throw it in some hot water, like literally the whole thing. It's a glass case with a plastic top and it's black. Sit it in like a pot of hot water for a few minutes. It liquefies again and usually doesn't crystallize again unless you put it back in the real cold. So I swear by it. I know Anthony uses it, or at least I think he still does. And it's good stuff. Yeah, the microwave, exactly. If it's cold in my house, I'll actually like sit on it while I'm tying and just warm it up. It takes about the same time to tie a couple flies, and then I'll just finish them all at once. But yeah, that's the Lara stuff. I don't mean to like product talk things, but that stuff is awesome. I've used every kind they have. I got lots of it, and yeah, it's good stuff. So I use it for like UV eyes and stuff like that too. So I think that's kind of it. I don't have much more than that, Anthony.
Thanks, Josh, man.
I'll catch you guys later.
Thanks.
Thanks, Josh.
All right, see you.